Okay, so the title was Archon Planet of Love, Deception, Illusion, Dream, whatever you like. Um, I had to get a good title in to get someone to watch, but I will go into why that is the case if I can. I will start by saying that the usual thing that we are spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality, and we're all connected. And we live in a vibrational frequency type universe, you could say. By universe, I mean what is the really big area, because I don't understand science. I've said this before. I'm speaking purely on my own instinct and information, and that's it. Okay, you don't have to go with it. You can go with the um, Archon robot human race world that is what we kind of are in now, and where we will continue to go if we, there will be a separation, there will be a choice, I think, as even though we won't be aware that there's a choice. Perhaps I'm aware there's a choice. Some people are more aware that there is a choice. Most people, I don't think they even have to make a decision or that there is a choice. But there kind of is, because if you do nothing, then you'll just go with the flow and you will be in that world, okay? But if you decide not to, then you have to decide and say, well, look, I want a natural world. I don't want a artificial world, an AI world type of thing, if that's the right word. And this is the choice, I think. And you have to decide what you are yourself, whether this is benefit to you or not, I think. But anyway, we are spiritual beings, and the spiritual being is different to an artificial being, okay? That should be logical, I guess. Now, when I say that this, it's a very, it's a duality world, and it's a very deceptive world, because there is the love hate, the duality world, right? We live in a world where we think we are spiritual beings and we are love and we seek out love, that type of thing. But this is why I say that even love is part of the dream world that we are in, because it's and I'm not going to be able to explain this well, I know, because it's a concept and it is hard. Even I find it hard because I get caught up in it too, and have most of my life. Now, even love in a world of duality, where it's love hate, which, as I've said before, is ruled by a God that is love hate, that is a duality God. That God, the entity, and even the human beings that rule at the top are very much in, because, when I say at the top, I mean the important people that operate for the God. And I say this, but if you want, as I've said before, and I hope I'm not confusing you, if you want to leave out the God that rules this world, the duality God that rules this world, if you want to leave that out, he's like an interdimensional being, okay? A technical, interdimensional, highly advanced technical being with many, many, many minions, millions and millions and millions of minions, followers, disciples, more than that, probably, more than millions, probably billions, okay? Billions. And they're here now. They rule this world, but we don't see them. We see the humans that operate for them, that acknowledge them and worship them, but we may not be aware of this, or we may be aware of it. I don't know. I'm not sure how many people are aware, and if you would know, they're out of my realm, because the human beings that would worship these beings would be in a very high social level, okay, because they would have the money and the power, because naturally the God is going to give his biggest disciples the most rewards. That's a kind of common sense. I know I've said common sense a lot of times, and people these days don't like you using that, but back a few years ago, common sense simply meant, and it still does, that what is common sense, what a normal average person, don't have to be real smart even, I don't like to use that word, don't have to be super intelligent, don't have to know a real lot, don't have to be worldly even, but just would see the obvious, shall we say, what is in front of them, and they'd say that looks and is a certain way, because it's like two and two makes four, almost like but anyway, I'm rambling on again. But what I'm saying is that it's common sense that if you're a god, you reward those that are the most closest to you and that do the most work for you and that serve you the best and that influence more people, because that way then you get more minions and more followers and more, because that's how it works. That's how it works in this world, okay? But it's a duality God, but if you want to forget about that, you can just say, well, we live in a duality world and the world operates that way. But I say it's all powerful, all governing, and all controlling, and manipulates every single thing and can maneuver everything in this world from the littlest to the biggest. So that has to be a godlike entity, okay? But different people have a different concept of God, and we have a certain concept of God in this world. We don't tend to think of the God as being a kind of interdimensional technical being. We tend to think of it as more spiritual. But that's because we think that way, and that's how we have been trained to think. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. It's not the case, as my information shows me anyway. That doesn't mean that there aren't. There again, I'm going to go off in tangents, unfortunately, as I always do. That doesn't mean that just because we, in our domain on this earth, are that this planet is completely operated by a technical, interdimensional, very advanced, super intelligent, godlike being. It's a godlike being because it controls this domain, and a god controls and can interact with something. He has total dominion over this earth, okay? Total dominion in every aspect, every way. And the humans that operate for him, his disciples, shall we say, they operate at the human level for him, okay? Now, just because there is the one entity that has many, many, many minions, and that entity controls this world and many more to a certain area, okay? I'm not sure what that exact area would be. I believe, as my information gives me, that it is much more than just this earth. But earth is, and it could even be extending out into a galaxy, that type of thing, and maybe parts of the universe. I do not know. I can't say if it's how big it is, but it is a closed off area type of thing that is totally that the God entity has total dominion over. and it's almost his creation now, because he has taken over it to such an extent, and he can control it in every way to such an extent, because if many of the humans operate also in that same way of thinking and operate for him, then that means that the world is largely that entity's domain, totally. Well, actually, totally. I'm just trying, but I'm saying that even though it's totally his domain, that doesn't mean that there aren't other beings on this earth that don't operate for him. In other words, you could have another type of human, shall we say. I was about to say another species, but it's really only another type of human that does not actually work or operate for him, and may not even be aware of him, okay? But I think most people are aware of Satan, Lucifer, that type of thing. And this is the same thing, even though these are only names. But it's the same type of thing, because that's what humans believe in, or have knowledge of, shall we say. And it's a right, wrong, good, bad duality God, love, hate God. And this is why I was going to say that even the love, the aspect of love, the idea of love, right, is used by the God to, shall we say, direct the humans that are on the planet a certain way, because spiritual human beings in particular tend to believe in love, okay? They know hate exists too, but they're searching for the love. And even love, because it is part of the duality God, even though the God really is a negative God. There's positive and negative, there's good, bad, there is right and wrong. That's all part of the game that the God has put on the planet for us to play, because he's a duality God. Because if there was only love and no hate, there would be no game and there would be no conflict between humans, as you can figure. But if you have it's kind of hard to explain, but if you have the extremes, like if you have, like you have hate at one end, like here, right? I'm trying to get myself into the picture here. And then you have love at the other end. And that's extreme hate and extreme love. And there's a continuum in between, like we have with everything, I guess, because nothing is usually right. But the God himself does tend to operate at the extreme. Like we think of Satan as being at the extreme. But there again, if you worship him, you would not probably think that. But it is a negative force and positive here. But I'm not explaining this very well, but what I'm saying is that even humans can play that game. The idea is to not play the love-hate game, or not even play the love game, really, because even love is an illusion and a dream in a way in this world, because it will be used for negative purposes, shall we say. This is the problem. So even love, if it's at this very big extreme, in other words, like where love becomes an obsession, or where you fall in love. How you fall in love. People get obsessed with the romance and the falling in love and the passion, the real strong love, the obsessive love. This is at this extreme, just as hate is. And this is just as bad sometimes as this, because it leads to an obsession about love. It's too much. It can be used against people, and usually it fizzles out at some point and then turns to this, to the hate too. That's another thing. It's not natural. I don't think the passion love, the romantic kind of love, where people fall in love and they think and they become very obsessed. They feel very high. It is a good feeling. And it is good because love is a good thing. Love is the only thing that can actually bring the vibration up, as I've said before, because it's all frequency in this world. Anything negative, destructive, hate, anger, animosity of any sort, even when you're in a conflict. But in this world, because we are playing this love hate game, and this love game, even a lot of the time, even the love is very much, I think, in this world used by, manipulated by the God and his way of thinking, to where humans end up creating a negativity even in the love world, shall we say. I'm not putting this very well, I don't think. I realise that. But what I am trying to say is that any extreme is no good. So in reality, humans, spiritual human beings, really need, I think, to not be at this end of the extreme love, where it's all about passion and falling in love and, so intense, really, really intense. It feels good. But, as you know from experience and even from what people will tell you, that kind of high state of falling in love and being in that, those first stages often doesn't last. It has to be, that's right, it does have to be tempered to where it can then go into a more middle ground, not at the extremes, to the middle ground, to where it's not like that, because that kind of state doesn't really seem to, it doesn't last most of the time anyway, and that's true. But what I'm trying to say is this, right? I guess I'm trying to say this, that because we're spiritual beings in a physical body, our thought creates reality and we're all connected. It is not realistic and not spiritual to love one person so passionately to the exclusion of all others who you are also connected to, and maybe connected to even more. You can be deceived by love too, because you can fall in love, as we all know, with the wrong people that are not spiritual and that are not to your benefit. This sort of thing too. So what I'm trying to say is this, and this also is, it's not a balanced state. It's not a state when you're too much into that extreme. Whereas in the middle, it's a state of, I would think, a state of more contentment, where, and also you don't get pulled one way or the other. You don't get pulled into the love or the extreme hate. You stay in the centre, and you're centered, I suppose, like some people might say, and so therefore you're balanced and you're content, and nothing can ruffle you in a way, and you will have love for all humanity. But it won't be this type of love. It won't be this all-consuming, passionate, overwhelming, high state of love where you're getting a real lot out of it. It will just be, it will be much more mellow, and it will be much more fulfilling in a kind of way, I suppose, because it's totally not connected to the bodily sensations, shall we say, either. It's not part of any of that. It's a spiritual thing totally. It's a compassion too. It's more like a compassion as opposed to love too, because it's just knowing that that you are connected to other human beings, And there would be a kind of security to that too, in a funny kind of way. I'm trying to find the words to put it into what it should be, but it's hard. But it's definitely not this one where you found your soulmate and this one-off thing where one person is more special. I'm not saying that in this world that you can't get on with some people more than others and that you won't have some things more in common with other people, because we are individuals, and that is true. But even that is probably because we have drifted a fair bit from what we are too, and even I would probably think that's true. Even though I know myself that some people I just would have nothing in common with. But if you are a spiritual being, it won't matter that someone else has different ideas or different interests to you or likes to do things different to you. That won't matter. If you have the spiritual connection, that will just be because you know that person has a basic kind of spiritual concept the same as yourself. It's very hard to explain. In other words, if we're spiritual beings in a physical body, our thought creates reality and we're all connected. You will just be connected to those other spiritual beings because you will know that they should, provided they haven't been corrupted or went and turned to the negative side, shall we say, because it is a negative world ruled by a negative God, in the sense that he operates in the duality, the love-hate, very much so. And there's the choice always. It's a test as well. So it is like that. This is the world that we have been put into, or some people would say we chose to be here. Sometimes that's a bit hard to believe. I know that's how I have felt for quite a long time. I'm like, why would I have made this choice? But maybe when I made the choice, it was a long time ago. Maybe things were different then, and maybe you thought you could make a difference, and maybe you thought that human beings were a certain way and that they had not drifted so much, so therefore you'd be able to balance things out. But in reality, it is the more it goes into the negative realm, the spiritual human beings, if they want to stay spiritual and if they still believe that that is the natural state and that that will benefit them and benefit other spiritual human beings, which if that's the truth, then that would have to be the case. If you go with the negative, even though it is easy to do that in this world because it's tempting and because there is so much negativity around, it's very easy to get caught up in the love-hate game because you see so much bad stuff going on. You see human beings treating you bad and so much hate directed at you. It's very hard to then balance it out and say, I am going to be loving when you have a lot of hate directed at you. And this is certainly how I have felt too. And I'm like, it's a bit like in that movie, The Matrix, which I'd seen not long ago, where the human beings, like the main character is going on a mission to help humanity to see the truth, to realize that they are trapped in a artificial world that, directs them and controls them by the God entity, like is the reality. But, he is told by his mentor or whoever the fella is, whatever, that the very people that you will be trying to save and help, you want to help them and you love them, they will probably be against you. They will hate you. So this is difficult then for him to go in and say, hey, do I want to save people that hate me? And this is how the world is now. The very people that are trying to help other people will be met with more hatred than the negative people. In other words, the good people will be up against more hatred than those that are negative and hate. Though the people that hate the most will be left alone, but the people who are trying to help or to show the humans that they are trapped, that they're in a bit of a trap, or even just to show the reality of the world as it is, because it is hard to see it. They will not want to see that, and they won't see it either because they will be very much like in that movie where they are very much into the material 3D type world, you could say, where they only see that and they don't believe that they're spiritual beings anyway, and they certainly don't believe that as a spiritual being that they have power that way or that they have an influence that way, even though their thought is creating reality. They don't know that the God plays with that. And even knowing it, it is still very hard to put a stop to it or to exercise your own ability to do these things without being intercepted by the God, without being intercepted by hate and negativity, which will naturally stop you from creating something positive. You will not be giving out positive vibrations. How can you give out love when you're being hit with extreme hate? And this is how the world operates. This is why it is the way it is. This is why we're not getting anywhere and why the world has gone right down. Um, and this is why it is very hard, even when you're aware of it, to to meet hate with love. Now, that is only very highly advanced spiritual beings. When I say highly advanced, I mean to where they have really risen their vibration to a high level, because to where they're not hurt and touched and want to hit back with hate at the hate that is directed at them. Because if you're in a low vibration, even like myself, for instance, you know this. You know that you are being hit with hate and negativity by human beings that are unaware that they are being directed this way, and that they also have been played with like pawns, like little toys by the God, because he knows what you're thinking. He knows what your next move is. He knows more about you than you know about yourself, because as human beings, we don't really know ourselves. We think that we are basically just this limited existence, and we very much think that we are the victim of our past and our circumstances. And we are too, but this is only because this is the setup of the game that we are playing here on Earth, because it's all set up. It's set up. Every move is set up for us to play in it. And it's only how we react to the setup and to the situations that are put in front of us that determines how spiritually advanced, you could almost say, or how much we can raise the vibration. And once you get caught in the game too much, then you will react to the circumstances. And if you're hit with negative circumstances, you will react negatively. As I've said before, right now, even knowing that you're being set up, even knowing you're playing in a game, even knowing that everything is fake, it is still near impossible to still not react with negativity to what is negatively put in front of you. Because if you are at a low vibration because of your circumstances, you will still hit back with more hate than love, because it's only when you can get to a higher vibration that you are able to ignore, I think, the negative hate and stuff that is put at you, and ignore the setups that are around you, ignore the situations that are around you, ignore negative people, ignore negative situations, ignore destructive things around you. You have to get to a higher vibration before you can ignore it. So that is the difficulty, because we are kept in the low vibration. We can't see it, for one thing, because there again you lose awareness when you're in the low vibration too. It's only when you can get a little bit higher that you can see things more clearly and actually use even your intelligence to get out of it or to control it more or to ignore it, because basically you almost have to ignore it. That is probably the real secret, I would imagine, because it's going to be very hard to change everything or you know, actually control the negative things that go on around you unless other people also raise the vibration and realize this and also combine with you. Because, like I say, we're spiritual beings in a physical body which governs us while we're here, but we're really spiritual beings. But we focus on the body and on the material and on the situations and things around us. This is how the game goes. This is how we get caught up in the fake reality world that we live in. You know, we say reality, but it's a fake reality. We're playing in it, but it's all fake, it's all set up, it's all artificial. And if you look around, if people could look around much more now than what they have in the past, because you need to look around more now, because in the past things were more natural. But if you look around now, you can see that it's fake, you can see that it's artificial. It's the same thing. I mean, if you're ruled by technology and you're living in a technological way and you're operating that way, then you are in a fake world. You've let your world become fake, more fake than what it's ever been, more set up than what it's ever been too, because the more you have technology, that's the more potential the God has to set up fake realities that you as a spiritual being are accepting. So that's another point too, as I've said before. Nothing can be put on a spiritual human being without their consent. But spiritual, and when I say spiritual human beings, I mean human beings, because we're all really spiritual, but most of us have lost sight of this, as I have most of my life. In fact, I never had sight of it at all. You tend to think we're physical beings in a physical world. Some of us might be a little bit more spiritual in the way we look at things and more loving and more this and that, but we still think we're physical beings. We don't think that we're just spiritual, and that is more important. And while you're in this domain, you do have to live in the physical, because that's the domain you've come into. And that's the trick and the trap, is that once you come here, you end up getting really engrossed in the physical. You lose, as time goes on, we lose sight of the fact that we're spiritual at all most of the time. We get away, so much away from it. And this is because the world makes us this way. It's not like from the day we're born, we're just allowed to be free and happy and just do our own thing and commune with nature and just dream and create and all that. No, that's not the world that we live in. It's very much it's a system, and it tends to pull us into the system and away from being free and creative and natural, and makes us negative and uncreative. In fact, most of the time, even when we're loving and creating, we're doing it on behalf of the God entity, and usually it serves his ends rather than ours. Even if we think, as I've said before, even good and truth is used just as much for bad in this world as for good. Because we are spiritual human beings, we have to be tricked into doing bad stuff in the name of good even. Because as spiritual beings, most human beings on the planet don't want to acknowledge that they're living in a satanic world that is very negative, and that they themselves have become very negative. And even if you haven't, we don't like to, we like to think of ourselves as loving, good beings. Not all of us, but most of us probably do. And this is also part of the deception. It's as I said, even the love and all that can be very much, it's very much a deception, because it's not our world. And we can only direct it so far. You know, whatever actions we're doing, because we have so little input really, and because we aren't connected as a whole, not spiritually. We're only connected artificially, and that's not spiritual at all. That is, and even that can be, oh, see, this is so complicated. Even that, it just occurs to me, even that can be used to trick us. Everything will be used to manipulate our feelings and our emotions and our capacity for love. That will be used to push us in even the wrong direction. Well, I'm trying to put it away. I've got an idea, right? Look, if the God entity wants us to be more technical, right, which is definitely the case in this world, I'm going to put it bluntly, he won't present that technical world as a cold, negative, controlled, low frequency, destructive world. It will be presented as something to unite humanity, as something that can exchange love, can exchange good things. Because humans would not buy into the truth of alien technology. They would have to be, it would have to be presented to the human in a way that entices the humans to think that it is a benevolent, good, sharing, kind, uniting thing, you see. But what I am saying is that that could even be the case. It could have even been the case if the technologies was not destructive and the force behind them was not negative, duality, shall I say, all this, and if the technology itself was just not. The problem is that just technology by its very nature on this earth, it's not natural technology. Anything that is not natural is alien to the authentic spiritual human being, I think. This is because even the human body is not technical. And if it was at its highest advanced spiritual, high vibrational level, it would be insurpassable in every way. In other words, it would, I hope I'm using the right words because I'm trying to impress here, but what I'm saying, it would be so superior and have so much and know so much and be able to do so much that no technology would come close or would even would compare in any way. And the technology would be the opposite, because the technology by comparison would be a destructive force, because it would mean limiting that, you know. And this is where we've got to, because the human being is right down at the low vibrational level to where all the abilities are suppressed and all the knowledge, all the awareness of everything is gone. Technology appears to be an open door to advancement in some way. And this is the deception, because technology is only advancement to a technical being. In other words, if you had like a robot or a machine and you gave it input, it can advance that way because it's technical, it's machine. And even if humans give it their input, which is what they do, then it advances. But if you give a human being technical, mechanical stuff, it does not advance. It stays at a low vibration and it does not advance at all. It can't, because it's not the way that a human being works. The human body and the human whole thing was already created in the beginning to advance itself. It was like a bit like technology in the sense that, if you know, they say how robots can learn and keep going. It's like that, except that there is a limitation on technology, whereas with the human, there was almost no limitation. But it's hard to explain, and most people are not going to kind of go along with this, I don't think. That's the problem. I'm trying to. It's like, you know, even robots and artificial intelligence is only as good as the human input anyway. They exploit, as does the God entity. They exploit and utilize what humans give them to then try to outdo the human, because the human is at a low level anyway. And so that's why artificial intelligence can overtake the human in most areas. Of course, they're not overtaking them in a spiritual area, but they're not spiritual at all. And even the intelligence and stuff is I can't explain it, but you see, if you're at a high, I would imagine that if you're at a high spiritual level, everything would be high. Even your reason and your intelligence and all these things that we think are separate from spirit, they would be high too. Um, but essentially, it's like the human was created, I think, to where it's, how should I explain it? It was like created to develop to the highest level, and it was created perfect, should I say? I don't like to use that word, but it was created with everything there ready to be activated, to where there was nothing that the human would need or would not know or would not be able to do to the highest level. This is a bit hard for most humans to understand, and hard for me to even grasp, because we have been suppressed to such a low level to where we are not even aware of any potential that we would have. We see potential artificially, and this is actually the complete reverse. This is the this is the artificial world, duality world, that the God that rules this world operates in. He operates through technology, as I've said before, and that's his means of interaction on this earth. That's his means, even with the humans that act for him and that operate for him. It's very much technology. Now, maybe I'm getting a little bit away from myself, because obviously I don't understand it all. But I am saying that there is a big difference between this God and the human being in its authentic form, as a human being is. Now, I'm not saying that every human on the earth is the same either, because, you know, I haven't looked into this enough yet. I do have my own kind of idea about it, and I think that I am on the right track, but I might leave it to another video to where I talk about the different types of human beings, because, you know, I've said before, we're spiritual human beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality, and we're all connected. That, I think, is what is the basis of a human being at the very basic level. And even that is quite profound, shall I say, probably, for a lot of us to comprehend, because even that we are not aware of. We do not operate that way. And even if we tried to, we are in an artificial domain. So that restricts our ability to operate naturally, to create and a reality, even with the thinking, with the emotions, with the natural abilities that we should have. And we do have them, but they are manipulated and intercepted by the technology. They always have been, but now to an vast extent that where we are giving over our minds and our spirituality also, if you'd like to look at it that way, to the technology. And that takes us then further away from becoming authentic, natural, spiritual human beings to where we can get back what we've lost and activate all the higher things that we were meant to have. So that means you're going from something natural that was supposed to develop naturally and organically, shall we say, if I want to, I'm trying to use the right words, and then you're going into something, you're turning yourself into something that is artificial and mechanical. Now, in the past, that would have seemed, dare I say, common sense that that would be detrimental and not desirable at all. Whereas we're now living in a world where humans think this is normal and desirable and acceptable. And dare I say that most of them are that way. I mean, I could quote other human beings, that's if they are, and I say if they are because, I'm even the people that, the human beings that say this is okay and that say that, it is good to be using so much technology. That is because they think that way and because they have been taken over by it. And also they are possessed. They are very much possessed in the mind by the negative God entity, shall we say, by the negative aspects of the God entity. Because the God entity himself even does give humans the choice. He has to. He is a negative God. He's a technological God. But he still gives humans the choice between the positive and the negative, the good, bad, the right, wrong, the that sort of thing. In fact, he operates totally in that world. That is his world, the duality reverse world. The reverse world part is where he twists it all round. So that we get confused and we think what is good is bad and what is right is wrong, or what is wrong is right. That's really the way it works. We tend to be operating now to where, even though we still think we are loving good beings, most of what we're doing in the actual world is where we think we're right and we think we're doing good, but usually because it is manipulated and controlled by the God entity, and he's extremely genius at maneuvering human beings and playing this good, bad, right, wrong duality game that he plays, and he's got the power and the controls of it naturally, and he can read human beings like a book. He knows what I will do before I do it. He knows my weaknesses and my strengths, etc. And so he can maneuver his game to cover all possibilities, shall we say. And he does this on a daily basis with every single human being on the planet. And we're unaware of it, as I have been most of my life, And if you think everything's random and just real and what you see, well, then you're automatically going to be playing the game. It can't be helped. Whereas if you acknowledge that everything is fake and that everything is in reverse, that what you think is good is probably bad or will serve a bad purpose down the track. Once you start to see that and you think about it and you actually observe it and you put all that together, because you do have to look at everything, how it fits together. And if you accept and know that it's a duality negative world, and that everything is reversed, which is also part of the philosophy, shall we say, of Satan or Lucifer or the God entity. That's the philosophy, to do that, to trick, to confuse, because the God entity, is very intelligent, very technically advanced in a incredibly high way. He is very super intelligent, and he has the advantage of vast amounts of time, more experience, and genius at and genius at the genius because of the super intelligence, but genius because of the incredible information and knowledge. And then having the total control over everything, you can imagine that gives an extreme upper hand. But the God entity is non-spiritual and sees no harm in the negativity and doesn't care for destruction. In fact, is a destructive force. It's a destructive God, a negative God, and does not care for spirituality, but is playing with spiritual beings all the time. I don't know whether I got that right or not, or whether I got it across right. But what I am saying also is that just because our realm is closed off region, Earth being the centre of it, because I have been led to believe that Earth is quite important. Although it is only a small part of the big picture, it is how people, many, probably thousands and thousands of years ago, how man thought that the Earth was the centre of the universe, that type of thing, and that's since by science been proved to be false. Well, that may not be as false as what we think. I mean, it may or may not be the physical centre of things. But just because that's not relevant, it still could be a very important force domain that determines the positive or negative vibrations that go out to the bigger picture. So it could be quite important. So it could be a kind of centre of the universe in a way. I think that is quite possible, because there again, whatever we are told, whatever we've believed, everything is in reverse, and it's a duality world. Right is wrong, black is white, left is right, good is bad. It's like that. So it's a world of massive deception. The God himself that rules it. I can give him all the accolades, right, and say he's this and he's that, and humans would probably bow down at his feet and worship because they'd say, wow. But that's only because they are suppressed and so limited, and have gone away from the spirituality and have gone into the physical, technical world. Physical, technical, mechanical, whatever you like. But even if you're obsessed with this world as it is, that's the domain of the God, and that's the trap of the God, to keep you in the physical, to keep you centered on the material, because there's nothing wrong with material, right? Because we are in this world for a time, and the physical is part of it. We were meant to experience it and manipulate it. We were spiritual human beings, but instead we are controlled by it. We buy into it at the expense of our spirituality. So what I'm saying is, it's not, even some religious people will go along that line. It's not the money, it's not the thing that is bad, it's just your attitude to it. But, there again, if I sound like a preacher and sound like them, I'm probably operating for the God, because all the religions are creation of the matrix, of the fake world, so therefore they are the creation of the God, because this is his domain. So that's why I say even good will be used to manipulate you, because you have to be manipulated by a certain amount of good if you are a spiritual being. If spiritual beings saw that everything was all negative and bad, like I'm saying, they would wake up and not be too happy. But while they can be manipulated by a love and by the dream, the illusion of love and all this to the extreme, it gets manipulated. Their spiritual nature is manipulated too. These are the the more spiritual, because I think that at the present time, a lot of human beings have been very much by circumstances and by the physical world made to be a lot more negative, to where they serve themselves and they're disconnected from other human beings. And you can't blame us for that, because that's how the world makes you. Because if you are if you get too manipulated and too treated badly and taken over by negative human beings, because they also are, it's a catch-22 and it's a vicious cycle. If we are all being traumatized by our surroundings, by negative circumstances, by negative people, and they also are traumatized and negative, because this has been going on for thousands of years. It just keeps going round to where we traumatize, we hate, we are negative, we meet negative people, that makes us negative. Negative things happen around us, that makes us it becomes like that, because that becomes the setup, because we've let the world go so much more that way. And we have never ever at any stage, and we know this ourselves, never at any stage has the whole world been at peace and everyone content. Um, and even that can be used against us too, because then they could say, oh, well, that's because there's too many of us and we're all in conflict, we all do wrong things, and therefore it's better if there's less of. Look, it's all a negative trick, everything. Every move we make, we almost need to make no moves and not even hit out at all, and not get too upset, not too much into the love or to the hate, as I've said before, the extremes, to almost survive and to at least try to get that balance back. I don't think I've explained this very well, because it's so tricky. That's the thing. It is so tricky. It's such a mass deception, this world. It's so massive, so vast, and so complicated, and so finely tuned, and so much down to the finest detail, that it, yes, it's almost impossible to find a solution, or to get out of it, or to not be playing the game, not to be playing in this negative video game, fake world game, that eventually takes us down a path to where we are totally non-existent almost. Because if you get suppressed to too much an extent, the freedom, spiritual beings are meant to be free and connected to others, and creating and loving, not passionately, obsessively loving at the extreme or falling in love, but just at a natural kind of universal level of oh, it's, well, you know what I'm trying to say. It's more like more like a compassion, where you just uh, you know um, but it's a harmony too. I would say it's a harmony. um, but um, oh, I'm not explaining it very well. I'm so sorry, but But what I am saying is, yes, but I'll just say a few more things anyway, that just because this world and many others too, it's probably a certain region where the God entity, let's say it's Satan, okay, that rules this world, that he's the negative force in our religions and things, okay? Now, I'll just bring this through because I'm getting this all back, because I'm not positive either, like if like once you get mentally and physically worn down by the negative world and the negative things that are thrown at you, it is very, very hard to get the vibration and the positive going. I think that is the only way that the spiritual human beings, those that are here, can make the world, or try to take the world back to its natural, authentic state. In other words, go back to the Garden of Eden, I suppose. That's right. Because obviously we took a wrong course. That's right. We went with the technology. We went with the technological God. We went with the serpents. All the same thing. It's a technological God, okay? Technological being, advanced, etc. All knowing, like a God. All this in comparison with what we were. We were meant to be all knowing and all that too, but we just didn't get to advance to that because we went off in the wrong direction. We went with the serpent God, we went with the tree of good and evil, that sort of thing, instead of just advancing ourselves, just ourselves, activating you could say activating our love gene, activating our high vibrational genes, that type of thing, to where then we would also activate high intelligence, high awareness, knowing everything, and then you would also activate physical abilities too, to where, because your mind would be so powerful, and we do tend to live, as the God entity knows, he knows that we live in a kind of holographic type of universe. He manipulates that. He knows that because we're in the bubble of this kind of holographic fake video game. What's the description, where you put the goggles on? Virtual reality world. He manipulates this virtual reality world we live in. He knows that. He knows that we should know it, but because we have been deactivated and pushed down to a low vibration, we're unaware of it, and therefore we can't manipulate or control it. Instead, he manipulates and controls it completely. And he's created a world that is to his liking, just as this planet is being created for his liking. Because I think that the actual technical gods cannot live in a natural world, okay? They live in technology. So they want this planet to be a technological planet so that maybe, and I'm only guessing this, maybe they can physically come back into it in a technical way. Because while it's a natural world, a spiritual world, which was what it was meant to be, but as you can see, it's not that now. It's a natural world that is governed by technology. Even nature itself is subjected to the vibrations of technology, just as we are. And this is alien to us and to living life forces. But to a technical being, they do not get anything out of nature or out of living things. They only get negative energy out of that because they can make it negative and destructive, and so therefore then they get the negative energy. But they need to live in a mechanical world. They need to live in an artificial world. They like that. That's their domain. They don't they don't like to live in the natural world as much. Or maybe they can't now. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, because I do think that there's ancient mythology. I've said this. There's what what we call ancient mythology. That is really a history of the world, I think. It's similar to the Bible, but it correlates, I think, with it, even though I haven't studied these things enough. But I think there is correlations between them. But the ancient mythology, the ancient gods, all these sorts of things, which have been, because we don't really have a proper record of it, and because the civilizations have been and gone and fell and been destroyed by technology, no doubt, because some of them were advanced. Therefore, we don't have the knowledge of that, and therefore it becomes mythology. We say it's past, but it didn't really exist. It's false. It's mythology. But I would be inclined to think that the ancient mythology is not a myth. It's ancient, but it's not a myth. Ancient mythology is ancient, but not a myth. It happened a long time ago, so therefore we think it's false, a myth. But ancient mythology is no myth. It's just as valid as our history or the Bible's history. That some people think that's myth too, so that's another thing too. But I'm saying that all these things are a history. It's just that we don't have the proper sequence. We don't have enough physical evidence for it, so a lot of people dismiss it. But if you think about it, we don't have much else. So I would say that if you're talking about, like I'm saying, that the God controls the earth, he's an ancient, technological, mythological God, really. He's around before man, and still around. And he has dominion over this world and many others, a certain area. And he would have been part of mythology, but we've lost that too, because in other words, he would have been the gods of different eras, but we would not be aware of this. So what gods they worshipped thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago is the same as like the gods we worship now. They're all one in the same. They're the same entity. It's just that we see them differently because he was represented differently at different times, but it's the one same force. Been around for a long time, since the beginning of mankind, or early on in mankind. I personally think that human beings were on this original Earth, a natural Earth, probably not the one we're on now, because this is not a natural Earth now. We still have some of nature, but we're gradually destroying it by the technology that we have around us. Just the very technology that goes around this planet is not conducive or at the right frequency for nature or for us. This is what I think anyway. But either way, we would have had an original Earth that was all natural, and we were spiritual beings, all natural, and plonked here on it. But soon after, the technical gods came, and I said gods because although it might be one that rules now, there is a battle, I think, going on, because these are beings that are vastly superior, but they're still like us in the sense that they probably have a family. They're a group of beings, a group, and they might fight amongst themselves for supremacy of this earth, and whoever wins the battle gets the prize, and the prize is the spiritual human beings and their planet. And then they can use that for their own means too, they can get much out of it. They might even need the resources. I believe they did originally. This is the history that I've been given. And then they decided to exploit the spiritual beings as well and use them for their, a bit like we use animals for our so-called benefit. They use us the same way. This is all against the natural way of things, but this is how the being operates, the God operates. So he has made us into versions of himself, shall we say, to where we operate that now too. Whereas originally, as spiritual human beings, we would not have, we would not use other life forms and regard them as lesser than ourselves and use them for our own ends. We not only wouldn't, but we wouldn't have needed to. And we would have been in sync with nature, etc. And we wouldn't have needed to. We wouldn't have wanted to. We wouldn't have needed to. And, it just wouldn't have happened. This is all a technical God entity's way of looking at things, because they see life in a different way to a spiritual being sees life. But they're aware that we see this, so they have to exploit that too. They can't, if they just came and right now said, oh, look, we are a certain way and you have to be that, have to be negative and have to be, unkind of loving and uncaring about everything. And a lot of human beings that still have a bit of spirituality would not buy that. So there has to always be the game and the deception and the masquerade that whilst we are creating a negative world, a technical negative world for them, that we are actually doing something positive. That's part of the deception. That's the love deception. As I've said, there's even love, as I've said before, truth and love, which a spiritual human being would probably value, they will be used as much as a weapon as hate or as anger in this world. But the result will always be negative energy. The result will always be what the God entity wants. He might have to wait a long time and manipulate human beings over many periods of time to get this and to get them to go along a certain path, which, as you can see, even with technology, if you only go back a little while, most human beings would have laughed at the idea, not only laughed, but thought it was abhorrent, the idea of integrating themselves to anything mechanical or robots and all that sort of thing. They'd have thought that was ridiculous and bad. But now human beings are seeing it as desirable, or at least some are. So this is part of the deception in a way. It's like you changing how you will view the world. And if you see something, in other words, we're seeing things different to how we used to. Now, some people would say that's advancement because maybe we were too narrow, maybe we were negative, maybe we were wanting to stay backward. You see, it all depends on how you look at it, but that is part of the game. But also I think that you just get conditioned gradually into accepting things and thinking that it's normal and natural, whereas going back a few years, you would have just, common sense looked at something and said, that doesn't look right, that doesn't feel right, that I don't think would be a benefit. And common sense should tell humans that if they replace themselves with something artificial mechanics, instead of doing things the slow way, physically, now this might sound backward, but think about it this way. If you choose to do something slowly, with your own hands, even though, as I've said before, human beings are spiritual beings and their thought creates reality. They should be able to do things much different to what they do anyway. But I'm coming from the viewpoint of this world as we know it now, to stop us from going further away from having the ability to go back and regain our spiritual assets to where we can advance spiritually and physically and mentally in every possible way, in the way we were meant to evolve, not like we are doing now, where we've just went from starting to evolve at the beginning, and now we've just gradually devolved. We've gone, and we're going from bad to worse. The only way that we need to go back and get a clean slate for a start, I think. That's how I see it. So that means that in order to have the potential to go back and retrieve the things that are really ours, instead of going into the artificial world, which will take us further away from evolving and further into devolving to where in the end we don't exist, we have to realise that we have to throw away, or at least start to going back to nature and realising that the technology is a downhill path, down a hill to where we'll never be able to get back up again. So we have to stop, I think, and say, look, okay, so yes, a machine can do work for me and do it faster and more efficient. This is the deception, you see. If I do it, it will be slower, it will be harder. But if you do it yourself as a human being, this is, and common sense used to tell people this years ago, that if you replace a man with a machine, that man is becoming redundant. So he loses his job, he loses his independence. He can't, whereas if you're even doing things at a manual level yourself, even though it might be hard and slow, you are free, you are independent. You still have control over your world. Once you let technology do stuff for you, that technology takes over. You become redundant. That's common sense, whether it be in work or even in your life. You become then dependent on the technology. So the technology has taken over. And these are all steps, but they're steps in a wrong direction. This is what I'm saying. Now, if you get where I'm coming from, and it's hard, we have to first go back. So that means it will be harder because you have to throw the technology away, do things physically yourself, not use machines in any aspect. Now, we still do things. Humans still build and do things anyway. Now, all the buildings and things, most of the masterpieces you see around were created by human beings when there was less technology anyway. So it shows that we can create just as much, even at a basic labour physical level, just as human beings. We don't actually need to have robots doing superhuman things. This just puts the human beings in a position where, unless you're the rich people or the people at the top that own all these machines and that are running all these things, you become redundant. And you don't have control over your natural world. You don't have control over the world. You're giving up you're giving up your freedom in a way. In fact, you are. But what I'm saying is we have to go back to where we are independent and free. And that means not being a slave to the technology, because the technology controls us and will take over and defeat us. And it will defeat us because the humans then will be subservient to the technology as opposed to the other way around. You can't have them both, I don't think. This is what I'm saying. One, they're not a benefit to the human being because they destroy the human being's ability to use itself and to look, I'm trying to say that if we're spiritual beings in a physical body, our thought creates reality, we're all connected, and we were meant to have the ability to do everything and anything we want and to create whatever we need, want, desire, etc. This is how we were meant to be originally. It sounds far-fetched. It sounds unbelievable. We think we can only get these things by technology and by other means. So what I'm trying to say is if we want to go back to being what we originally were, or what we should have developed into, because we never got there, I don't think. Some have, but they're only the exceptional few human beings that have been able to activate their whole body and mind and spirit together, how shall I say, and raise their vibration to such a high level to where they have been able to go back to what a human being was originally meant to be. But not many do this, very few. In fact, these are the ones that we would see a Jesus like as a God almost, because, and yet, this was how human beings were meant to be. But like I say, we've all slipped right down to the opposite, and myself included. But if we were able to get more back to nature, not reliant on technology, and get rid of those negative frequencies, and get our bodies and the earth back to a natural state, it's quite possible that many more human beings would be able to raise the frequency. And as we're all connected, if one or two raise it, the rest automatically rise. So this is how it works. And this is why the God knows this. So he has to keep everyone at a low frequency and down in the dumps and in a negative state, one way or the other. Even if you're doing good, you can still be in a negative state because you're fighting. You've got a cause. As I've said before, you've got a problem. Even if you're trying to make things good, you're still not just standing back and in a neutral state of mind to where nothing bothers you and you just let it be. That doesn't happen for most people because they look around at the world. Even the good people even look around the world and say, "Oh, what a mess! I've got to do something." So they start fighting in a funny kind of way, even though they might not be fighting like physically. They've got a cause. They're still trying to do something. So they're under that stress. They're in that mindset. They're not just in a state of in that middle thing where I said before, where you got the hate at one and the love, where you're in the center, where you're just like, I'm content. Doesn't matter what's going on. I've raised my vibration. I'm fine. And how do you get there? That's right, when the world is chaos. So this is the thing. But if people could do that, even a few, that will be passed on to others. It all helps. And once you get a certain amount raising the vibration, then, you know, you defeat the technology, you defeat the world, you defeat the God entity in a way, even though you're not really here to defeat him, but he probably would not want the domain much then because, it's low his domain is low frequency, technology, that sort of thing. He wouldn't want to live in that. Well, he doesn't anyway, but he's creating that world to where maybe he does want to come back and live amongst the humans. But the trouble is that if we become too technological, then we are no longer human. So it would merely be that he's living amongst his own kind. He will create the human to become more like him instead of the human becoming more like they were supposed to be. Because humans are spiritual beings in a physical body, their thought creates reality, and we're all connected. And we are meant to live in a natural, organic environment where we create, we have full freedom, full control, full abilities, full, the words, I don't like the English language words, that's another invention of the God. Because the words don't convey the right message, and this is the problem. I don't like to use words like power because it implies something that really is not part of the spiritual being in a way. But if I do use that word, it means to where you do have the full power. The full power is like having the full force. Yeah, like the force in in the Star Wars thing, even though I haven't seen it, the Force, human beings are meant to have the Force. The Force be with you means that you have the full potential to do anything, things that you didn't think you could do. And that force is a spiritual force. It's not a physical force. Physical force is the domain of the God entity. The physical world is his domain. It's his way of getting humans to fight, to deal with things. But it's not the true force. It's not their true power at all. No, it's the opposite, really. It's tricky and it's hard to explain, and it's hard for me to even get my head around it. But it is like that. And I went off the track again too, in the sense that I was going to say, and I'm just trying to get myself back on track before I finish, that even though you do have gods that have fought for this earth, because the God that rules now is only one of probably many gods, in the sense that, like, he wants to be the only God, and he does rule this world, so he is the only God for here, right, and for the domain that he covers. But that doesn't mean there aren't rivals or other gods, because they're all like a family. They're all very advanced beings and they're destructive creator beings, shall we say. I say destructive, negative, because that's how they are for humans, because humans are spiritual, whereas they're technical, okay? And their domain is the opposite to the spiritual human beings' domain, even though we are in their domain, which is, because we've allowed that to happen, because we're given free choice as spiritual beings, but we have chosen to let this domain become like it is. We haven't done it always consciously. Most of the time we're in so much trauma and so much surroundings going on around us that we're just creating this negatively unconsciously. And the God entity knows this, because he understands how the human mind works. He understands the spiritual being. He can see all the different realms, which we're meant to be able to see, but we can't see our reality anymore, because it's all been closed off from us, because we didn't develop. So we're unaware that we're creating. We're unaware that we should be able to see everything and create everything and do much more and have abilities. And we should be able to maneuver this reality the same way that God does, more naturally and more fluently too, I might add. But instead we have gone the technical, slow, mechanical way, to where we think that's how we operate, and we think that's what we are, because we think that we are very much just our physical body, which also has been limited, completely drained and limited by the technological environment and by the manipulation of this video game world. It's all fake, and it's controlled, and it's a virtual reality world that the God can make any way he wants. And he uses technology for this purpose, and he wants a technological mechanical world, whereas the human can only evolve spiritually and get all their abilities and advance and evolve properly in a natural world. And yet we're stuck in a technical world. So it's, as I've said before, we're like fish out of water. And if we stay out of water too long, we'll eventually, what happens to a fish if it stays out of water too long. Yeah. You get by for a while, at any rate. But like I say, there are the gods, how I say the battle for heaven and earth. I've heard that saying. Well, that's essentially what it is kind of like. There's a battle going on, but we're unaware of it. Human beings are stuck right in the centre, in the middle of the battle, but they're unaware that they're battling one another, and so therefore they're also contributing to the outcome of the battle. The gods are battling for supremacy of the earth. They battle with one another to have dominion over the earth, because they only want to be the one God. They only want to be the one ruler. It's a bit like in a country. You don't want to have a couple of leaders. They want to be the one leader. They want to be the one God. And so they battle one another, but we don't see this because it's like ancient mythology. That's right, we think it's a myth, and even if we should be able to see it with our eyes almost, but we can't because we're closed off. They see us and many other things, but we see nothing, um, because we're not at full potential. We should be. It's a bit like saying if you're meant to be psychic, but most humans aren't, right? But all humans should be. They should be able to read others' minds, see things, and all this stuff, but they can't because everything's been closed down. And this is the same thing. And this is a reality too. That we would have vast abilities. We would know all. That's what I think. We were meant to know all. We were meant to have access to all. Now we think the only way we can access anything at all is via technology. This is not true, but it is how it is now. But we need to go back, I think, start again, become natural, become neutral in our feelings and thinking. So therefore we have to ignore the negative around us, not become too much into the extreme love or extreme hate, because this is the weapon, the manipulation of the God. He knows all these things. He knows what human beings are meant to be. He knows how they think. He knows how they operate. And he's been manipulating that for thousands of years. Now, just because you have these negative God entities that rule the earth and that manipulate and control this virtual reality world that they have created, and are creating it more virtual reality every day in a technical sense, okay? Whereas it's meant to be a virtual reality natural world, if I can put it that way, even though it's beyond me even. You have these negative God entities that are more destructive rather than creative, and use the constructive spiritual human being to create a negative world, a destructive world, because you can use that ability that humans have. Humans, spiritual beings, their thought creates reality. So if you can manipulate the human mind and the human psyche and their emotions and their feelings and their, if you can manipulate that, if you can control that, if you can maneuver that and tweak that almost, you could say, which is what the God entity does, then you can create a destructive, negative world. And that's what he does, because his mindset is more destructive and more negative. And I don't know why this is, but he's a duality God. And he uses the duality, the love-hate, to control and manipulate human beings. But he himself is in that mindset. He's not stable. He's not stable. He's chaotic in thinking. This has happened to him, I think, a bit like the Bible, where Satan is cast out type of thing, even though I'm not that familiar with it. And because he became too egotistical. But you see, the ego can stop a being from accessing their higher power, their higher spiritual self. It can actually limit even the intelligence. Like, you could have a very egotistical human being that is very intelligent. But however intelligent they are, they would be more intelligent if they let go of the ego, because the ego is a weakness. It's good to know that you are an advanced being. That is the truth, that human beings were advanced beings. They're meant to be. But the ego isn't accepting that you are an advanced being. It's actually where you subconsciously think that you aren't something, and that you replace it with this fake ego, almost, to where you're like, oh, I've got to prove that I'm better than someone else. The advanced being doesn't need to do that. and doesn't do that, doesn't think that way. So the ego is used against human beings, and it keeps them less intelligent, even though they have the potential to be very intelligent even, but it can be a dangerous thing, because the God being, has, demands to be the God and wants to be the one only God, but, you know, he has chaotic love-hate thinking, duality thinking. He's lost his spirituality, so like Satan, cast out, lost their spirituality, replaced it with extreme ego. It's hard to explain, but even I don't fully understand it. But what I'm saying is that, my information has led me, and the information I've received about this is that even the Satan idea that he was cast out of heaven because he was too vain, too egotistic, is not true. Sure, that could have been the case, that he might have been a little bit more egotistical and more vain but then again, he was a very spiritually advanced being and would have had many followers, because the fact that he took many minions with him when he left proved that many people, many other beings, did worship him and think that he was special and as such. But that wasn't what caused the problem. Something happened to where, he lost the spirituality and became chaotic in the thinking. In other words, became of the duality mindset. The swinging, almost like what some people might call the bipolar, where you're swinging from love to hate at a vast rate, unnatural, unstable. That's the thinking, and that's the thinking that is put human beings into, and this creates chaos. This creates insanity, almost an insane world, negativity, destructive, right, wrong, and love, hate, just escalating backwards and forwards. Nothing, not in the center, to where you can ever stop and become stable, shall we say, even much less ever get up to a spiritual, high vibrational state, to where you can just naturally be able to be to know all, and to be intelligent, and to make the right decisions, and to just know what is right and what is good and what is bad, even though that is used by the God, once again, the duality. But you just know these things. There is no right or wrong or good or bad in a highly spiritual, advanced way of thinking. They just automatically should know what is correct somehow. I'm trying to put it into words, but it's hard to say. As opposed to fighting that, as opposed to thinking, oh, it has to be extreme good or bad. If everyone is thinking the correct way and in harmony, there is no good or bad or right or wrong. It just is, and it's just right, and it will, and everyone will be at a high level. Whereas we are seeing that only thinking that, oh, we can advance ourselves only through artificial means, artificial intelligence type of thing. There is no artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is to me, as a spiritual human being, if human beings are spiritually human beings, which I think they are, the artificial intelligence is nothing but what it is, artificial, fake intelligence. Garbage, really, by comparison with a spiritual human being. it's a it's a big fraud, I think. It's not real. It's it's merely a mechanical, it's like a robot, it's a mechanical control device. A robot is controlled. And that's what artificial intelligence it is. It is just a fake artificial intelligence. It is artificial, fake. It is fake intelligence that is controlled by other beings. It has no merit in this world or place in this world, and yet the whole world is ruled by it. So this is the dilemma, and this is the problem that spiritual human beings are spiritual beings in a physical body. Their thought creates reality, and they're really all connected. This is the dilemma we are now in, because we are in an artificial world where we're connected artificially. Everything is artificial intelligence, even though it is just fake intelligence. It's just control intelligence. It's just a system. But it has the ability to control us, to limit us, to keep us from evolving. And it has done that. And we are all right down here now, all of us. And even those that are able to pull themselves up a bit at a vibrational level and at a spiritual level, same thing, to where they can see this and can even perhaps get themselves out of it to some extent. They're not going to be able to access very many of the other beings, their other fellow parts, shall we say, because we're all connected. So it will be hard. And I wonder how many are even of us are even getting even remotely at a remote reasonable level of vibration. I think this planet as a whole is completely governed by really low vibration. Even those that are aware, because I'm saying I'm aware of it, but if you're already in the low vibration, see, even knowledge is not going to be any use. You still have to be able to, knowledge is no good without wisdom and without the ability to ignore, I think, your surroundings and to ignore the fake world. And that is pretty hard because we're living in it. We have connections to it. We're meant to be connected to it even. We're meant to be connected to the natural world. We're meant to be in sync with it, and we still kind of are, but we're living in an artificial domain. It's kind of strange that even myself or anyone else, if we're talking about helping the natural planet, that we would be using technology as a means to help it. We would be communicating with artificial things to even be doing some good. It's all a contradiction, and it won't work. And it's part of the joke of it. You'll just be punching air. We'll all be punching air. We'll be fighting air because you can't defeat technology with technology. You can't make the world natural with technology. You can't right the wrongs with something that is wrong. Am I making sense? I'm not sure if I am. It's just coming to me. But you see what I'm trying to say is that you can use it now temporarily, as I'm doing right this second, to communicate something because our natural communication is so suppressed. But you must be aware that it has to be a temporary thing and must be abandoned in favour of going back totally to the natural world. You can't pretend to save the natural world and isolate it and say, I'm going to make a park or a garden in the middle of the city and that's okay. You can't do that. I mean, you can do that, but it's not what you're supposed to be doing. It's not acceptable. It has to be all. Just like the God entity that rules this world is all or nothing. He is all or nothing. And he's made it that way for humans, that mentality. His mentality is that it's all or nothing. I'm going to have the world, you're going to worship me, it's my world, and it's going to be the way that I want it. And this is the thing, but really, it is a battle in the sense that nature is in opposition to technology, but humans do not see that, even though humans want to. Well, I don't know whether some humans want to because they like nature and they are spiritual and they like living things, right? Which is how it's meant to be. But others just say, well, hey, I don't care about nature, but I don't want to lose my planet because that means I lose my life. That's how they see it. So they will jump onto the bandwagon of saving the so-called planet anyway. But it's not, that is not going to work, I don't think, because it has to be where you accept that we have to go back. We have to go back. We have to go back to a natural world, and we can still have things because while we are limited, we will need help. So we will need kind of not. See, I really think that I'm sure that we could still have things that help us even at a mechanical type of level, provided we are using natural means to get those things. In other words, if I want to, like we have electricity, right? But it's not natural electricity. Like there could be ways probably of making electricity, like they talked about the wind and stuff to generate things. That sort of, I don't fully understand, but that's a natural way. So you're not doing it technologically or artificially, whereas everything we do is technological, artificial, and toxic to ourselves and the environment. And everything we use is toxic one way or the other, even though we can't see it. We can't see it through the air. We can't see the fact that it's not only toxic at a chemical type level, but it's toxic and alien to us in the sense that it is not the right vibration. The frequencies that are going through the air and through our bodies and through every living thing's body, every aspect of nature and ourselves, and we are part of nature. We are spiritual beings, we're part of nature, we're not part of a mechanical, technical world. But we are now, but we're not meant to be that way, and we aren't that way. But the God entity that rules, he is technical. So this is his domain, and that's his world, and that's what he likes. And he wants us to be incorporated into his technical world. But that will be at the expense of our lives or our existence as spiritual beings. And it will mean limitation and compromise, as it has been right from the beginning when we interacted, when they came and we interacted. And so it's been a gradual decline in the evolution of the spiritual human being. And that's, but as I said, I still haven't got to the little point that even though these are negative, like you would say Satan is a negative God, right? If he rules the world, and even if you say the religions are ruled and he rules the religions. But I'm trying to get to the point, I'm not making it clear, I know. But that does not mean that there is not a positive creator God. I mean, who created the human being? Who created the spiritual human being? You see. So there must be some other force, and we would be part of it because human beings as spiritual beings are meant to create reality with their thinking. They do, and they're all connected, etc. So it's something that's beyond us in a way to think about even. But I'm just going to leave it there to give you something to think about. So I'm saying that even though the technical negative gods fight amongst themselves for dominion over this earth and other parts, no doubt, but they have pretty much control over a certain area. This is their insane asylum because they think, like I say, backwards and forwards. That chaotic thinking is a kind of insanity. That kind of duality world, that duality thinking, that love hate, that extreme love hate all the time, that right wrong all the time. That is the thinking of the God entity. That is they think different to a spiritual human being. That's if a spiritual human being gets to advance to how they know this. And even if you don't get to advance, some of us are still aware that this is how it's meant to be. And I think most human beings do still think, oh, we would like a peaceful world, we would like to be in harmony. They're just going the wrong means about achieving it because they're in this artificially created matrix virtual reality world that they really do not have full control over or full comprehension even of. They actually think that it's their world, that they run it, even though I'm sure a lot of human beings would say they know they really don't run it, but they think other human beings at least run it, and they think that those human beings would not want to destroy the world. Um, and this is where they are probably incorrect. But and when I say, you'd say, well, look, even if I'm a human being and I'm a mad scientist and I can destroy the world, I'm not going to destroy the world because I'm living on it. Well, there again, you might, if you're a mad scientist, you might be able to go to another planet. So you might not really care, because you would have more technology, you would be in contact with the God entity. So you would have that ability. But also, you would probably have the means to destroy only as much or as little as what you wanted, and who and what you wanted, etc., etc. If you wanted to pull down certain bits of nature, you could or you would. It would be under your control to pretty much do what you wanted. And depending on your rational or your thinking and what you want and what you think is going to benefit you, you will destroy what suits you and leave what suits you and manipulate what suits you. And then if you're working for the technical God entity and you worship him, you will pretty much probably do things that you might not have done if you had evolved to a spiritual human being, because you have devolved and allowed yourselves to be taken over by the satanic way of looking at things, the satanic duality, do what you like, doesn't matter, no consequences. And to some extent, the consequences will be less for you because you might have other alternatives. Whereas most of us that are stuck here on this planet, we will be victims of that because we will not be able to just have so many choices. And even if choices are presented to us, they will be dictated by the higher powers, shall we say, higher human beings, the powers that be, whatever description you want, I don't know. But you know what I'm saying? So once again, you'll be totally unfree and total victim and totally at the mercy of the god or gods, depending on, who fights it out and who wins dominion over the earth. That may already be decided. I'm not going to go there because I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that it's changed over the many, many thousands of years. Ancient mythology even would show that. Most people don't believe in it, but I would say that that is a record of at least past history of this earth, the same as the Bible has things in it where they did exist, because these are beyond timelines that we are able to see now. We only have the very close past to really say that we're even sure of things that happened. But we really don't know what's happened, 100,000 years ago. We don't have a clue. We have ancient mythology, which we think is a myth because it's so far from us. And even that is probably not a real strong record, but there's enough there. And certainly there were gods around. And these are the same God. They're just different names for the same entities. They may even take different forms for all I know, because a god can probably change form, A god could probably, especially even technologically, you can manipulate a holograph. If we do live in a kind of holographic reality, which science half acknowledges now, you can manipulate a hologram any way you want. And if you have vast technology, you can do that. So therefore you can create any images that you want. Human beings were supposed to create reality with their thinking. As I say, they're spiritual beings in a physical body. Their thought creates reality and we're all connected. They can do that with their thinking, but this has all been taken from them, all been manipulated. And if I'm doing it now, I wouldn't know what I'm creating because it's manipulated by the God and by the technology and by the fact that I do not have access to my full mind. You're probably saying, no, she definitely doesn't with some of the stuff she's saying. Well, that's actually true, but I do not have access to my subconscious mind. I have access to my conscious mind, and even that is so manipulated by what goes on around me that most of the time you can hardly think, and this is the reality. And our physical bodies have been brought to such a low level of health that we cannot use the physical abilities even that we were meant to have. So we use technology, which is the trick and the trap, to do things, and we think that offers us supernatural ability, shall we say. We think, oh, that computer can do this, that computer can think this, that robot could do this or that. And look, this is all part of the illusion and the deception, because we were meant to be able to do, just as, I think, as a single human being, we're meant to be able to do everything just ourselves and be totally independent and free doing that. We didn't need any outside technological, any sort of other beings and things to help us, or we didn't need that. And now we do, and we think that is reality, whereas our real reality has been, the wool's been pulled over our eyes, shall we say, for all of us. And I know that's been the case for myself. And then when it gets pulled to where you are shown these possibilities, you still don't believe it because you're not able to put them into practice at a full level. So it is very difficult. And but as I say, these these gods, or God, because one of them will always reign at a given time, because they're not, like the Bible says, you must not worship any other God but me. This is also the text of the God entities. This is how they like to be seen. So they're not going to share their throne with someone else. You have to only have the one God. Now, this is in this domain. But outside of our controlled holographic video game virtual reality world, it may probably not be like that at all. It would probably be much, much different. But that would be beyond our thinking almost. But also, as I've said before, these gods that have fought over the earth, but the God, one that rules at a given time, they expect humans to see them as their one God, which is a fact anyway at this time. But they like you to think that they created you too. And they have manipulated and made the human being, or at least most of the human beings that are human beings that are here, they have created that being in the sense that they have manipulated the original human being to be the lesser form of what they originally were and what they are now. But we believe that is the advanced, evolved human being. I'm saying it's the devolved, lesser human being. But the beings that the God entity likes the human being to think that that is the evolved version of the human being. Version of the human being. But certainly it is not his whole creation, but what exists or has existed for a long time with most human beings is that human being that he has genetically and through breeding, intervention, etc., what he has created in a way, or at least what is here now is the result of his interaction with the original, authentic, spiritual human being. That's what I think anyway, and likes and most human beings would probably, if they were even aware of the history, there are many that would say, well, we were created by him or by his race, depending on, like if the being that rules now is the same kind of master geneticist that manipulated the original human being species, whatever that was, and turned it into the human beings, or most of the human beings that are here now. I personally think that there are not just one race of human beings on the planet anyway, that there is differences between the human beings. And this is probably due, when I look into it, I will look into it a bit more if I can to find out a bit more. I would guess that that is because, some human beings would have been breeding with different entities, different technological beings. Others might have bred with another species or something, because it's like when you have animals, right? You can mix different animals together, you can get different animals breeding with others, you can get different types of dogs breeding with other dogs, and they produce then a different species with different qualities, where some qualities might be expanded and others might be suppressed. The human being was genetically engineered by the God to be the sort of human that would serve him best, work for him best, not work for the human best, but work for him best. So if certain abilities would mean that you wouldn't serve and work for him, then those abilities would be suppressed. Whereas if some ability was needed, that would be left or perhaps expanded in some, that type of thing. It's genetic manipulation. And this is where humans are now heading to, even at a biological level, even with breeding, and that attitude seems to be that this is okay. I personally don't think it is okay at all. I think it's a very negative, bad idea, and it's just going more down that path of mixing things up, creating what you call hybrids, as opposed to pure species, I do not personally think this is desirable at all. I think it is another direction of negativity. It might appear to offer more, but this also is going away from the spiritual human being. So, whilst it might appear to give more intelligence, there's no point in being more intelligent at the expense of being less spiritual. You might laugh at that, and I would have laughed at it not long ago too. But it is true because the God himself is vastly intelligent, but it's no good being intelligent if you're insane, okay? In fact, it's dangerous. And this is the world we live in, where we have very many intelligent human beings, intelligent beings, but they are insane. They do not have any, the old saying, they don't have any wisdom at all. They do not know what to, they will use their intelligence to invent things, to do things, but none of it will be able to see the future in a clear way. They will do things randomly, they will experiment and muck around, which is what the God does too. And they won't have the ability to say, is this good for humanity or good for us in the long term? They won't do that. They'll just do it because they can. And they will live in the moment and won't care about the consequences. They'll say that they do, and they'll talk that because they know that human beings do have some sense. But if you're dealing with a chaotic duality mind, an unstable mind, it is just not possible to do that. And this is the problem with the God entity, is that he has this unstable duality mind. Genius as he might be, intelligent even as he might be, but there is no, as I say, if insanity comes in, you can still produce and do things because you're intelligent and because you're advanced, but you won't be able to put it in the right context. You won't be able, you will, and of course, if that world suits you anyway, if you're chaotic thinking and you've got the technology and you want a particular type of world, you will accomplish that. But that is not the way a spiritual human being would think, because they would be thinking what is best for their own self, their advancement, and the advancement of all natural life forms, and the advancement of the domain they live in, and the universe in general, kind of even, because they would know that it's all vibration frequency and that there will be no harmony, you know. But if you're a chaotic duality God that actually doesn't worry about destruction or that type of thing. In fact, actually, that is almost their element, because they're very it's a bit like a master warrior. If you're a master warrior or a general, you want there to be always a state of war, because you are in your element, you are at your best. You're not going to be able to be a person that goes and sits under a tree and paints a picture on a piece of canvas and creates. Your element is war. You're a master strategist at war, at chaos, at destruction. You thrive on it. That is your element. A spiritual human being, that is not their element. They are creators. The others are destroyers. Satan destroys. A spiritual creator being creates. See, that's how it is, and that is also the technological gods. Satan is their representation on Earth. So they're opposing forces, shall we say, and there's a battle. And it's up to humans to decide, I suppose, which way they want to go. But it's very hard because we're unaware that we're in the centre of this battle. I wasn't aware of it either. And even at a personal level, We are in this battle daily at a physical, mental, psychological, spiritual level. Every level. We are being hit at every level by technology, by the physical, by everything. And we're confused by it too. We've become as chaotic and as crazy as the God entity that rules, because we are in chaos, and it's very hard to be spiritual, much less go back to nature and start again and evolve naturally to where we can become superior beings, or as we're meant to be, just as we're meant to be, and if you look at it, if we looked at it practically, just even at a logical level, that would mean being very superior beings and having everything and anything, which is what we are half striving for through technology and stuff, which is artificial and not suitable for us and not viable, and can never take us to the heights that we should be going anyway. It would be limited even at its very highest, but we would not see that, because if you haven't touched the stars, you're only going to settle for the moon, that type of thing, Well, I'm sounding very fancy there saying that, and I'm sorry to be ridiculous, but I'm trying to, you have to find words and metaphors to try to get the idea across. It's hard. But anyway, I better close off now, because I'm getting tired and exhausted myself, and this world doesn't leave you with a lot of energy. That's the whole idea. Human beings should have boundless energy and boundless enthusiasm and be happy all the time. We shouldn't be like, even myself, feeling, see, even awareness these days, to know these things, creates more negative energy, because you're like, what can you do? So then you become depressed, like, how can we pull ourselves out of it? Especially if you're a lone wolf, shall we say, alone, and not, because, we're meant to be all connected in a spiritual way, not in the way that we are now connected. That's right. This all connected stuff, We're not connected spiritually, we're just connected artificially. That is not the way. It's the way it's the way that we are going, where we become less, something else becomes more, and then we cease to exist. So it's common sense, and yet we're not seeing it. And I don't blame people for not seeing, because I didn't see it either. But it's there. If you just think about it very sensibly and just look at it even at a practical, very basic level. If you use a machine for something apart from yourself, you've lost your independence. You've given it over to something that's less than yourself, that then is taking your life from you, taking your living from you, taking your living literally in every way from you. And, that's just the way it is. But, it is what it is, as they say. But we need to think about that and take a different path. Go back, take a different path, go down the right path.